This is Fit to Succeed in partnership with NordicFitnessEducation.com with hosts Ben Pratt. Thanks for joining us.
For me, that was about really taking stock of, right, what am I good at, who do I help, and what do I specialise in? I think it's important for anyone who's thinking about getting into the online space. Yes, it's really good, and yes, it means your body doesn't go through as much physical torment, but it is a lot of work.
And welcome to another episode of Fit to Succeed. Today we have a wonderful guest with us. Her name is Katie Bulmer-Cooke. Katie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And Katie, you have had quite a varied fitness career, and you seem to dip in and out of a number of different spaces. You're into group exercise, you're into personal training, you have a number of different campaigns and marketing things that you get involved with. Perhaps I could ask you what motivated you to start your fitness business as a freelance trainer rather than jumping into work with an established fitness chain?
To be honest then, it wasn't really a choice. I qualified as an exercise to music instructor back when I was 16, and I'd always wanted to work in health and fitness. My mum has worked in health and fitness forever, and I grew up on group fitness, so for me there was nothing else I wanted to do. It was only ever that I wanted to go out there and teach classes. So when I qualified when I was 16, I thought, right, I'm going to go and apply to all of the local gyms. So I went to the big health clubs, I went to the small independents, but unfortunately, they all felt unanimously that I was too young at 16, didn't have enough experience, so they didn't really feel, and I guess looking back, understandably, didn't feel that confident about putting me up in front of their members alongside some more established instructors. So I went home and sulked about that for a little while, and then thought, well, if I really want to do this, obviously nobody else is going to give us that opportunity. I'm just going to have to bite the bullet, as they say, and try and do it on my own. So just went and found a dodgy old community centre and went from there and started my classes like that. But for me, it wasn't really a choice. What I'd wanted to do originally was go out and work in all the big health clubs and with all the big chains, but they sadly weren't interested at the time, so I had to go it alone from 16.
Oh, that's interesting that you had the determination even at 16 to, and perhaps even the business brain to say, well, if I can't get some work in that specific field because of my inexperience, I'm going to try it myself.
Yeah, and I think looking back, that was quite a big decision to make, but at the time it didn't feel like such a big decision because I really wanted to do that as my job, and I'd always been quite motivated to stand on my own 2 feet financially. So I didn't want to rely on anybody else. I didn't want to have to go and ask my mum and dad, oh, will you lend us this, will you lend us that? I just wanted to go and be able to do it on my own.
So would you say from that then that you kind of feel that being a businesswoman is kind of in your genetic makeup?
I would say so. I'm driven by 2 things. The first thing is I like seeing other people being happy, whether that be clients who've achieved their goals or other people who are in business who've achieved really good things. I really like seeing other people be happy and do well. But I am secondly motivated by creating a nice life for myself. And obviously to have a nice life, part of that is money. You need to earn good money. So I think those 2 things together have always been ingrained in me for as long as I can remember. And I think
that's interesting.
That's why.
There was a survey done just recently of personal trainers across Europe, and it's the first one of its kind. And that survey, the number one reason why people get into business as a personal trainer or as a fitness trainer of any type was exactly that, was to help other people. So again, it's interesting that was your motivation, even at the tender age of 16, that you wanted to help people out. Was that instilled in you by your mum? You said she worked in the industry?
Oh, yes, definitely. So she always had a full-time job. She worked for our local council, delivering activity, sports development. She organised big football events, and that was her main job. But then on a night, she would go out, like I did, and hired a church hall and have all our classes in there, back in the days of leotards and lycra and all that sort of thing. But I just loved it, and I don't think she was doing it purposely, but along the way she was obviously teaching us a lot of things about customer service, about getting your money right, like what you pay for your hall and versus what you're going to charge everyone. And all these little bits of things I think have just amounted over the years, and that's really why I wanted to get into fitness.
So did you used to go to your mum's classes?
Yeah, so I went from being 4 because my dad used to work away in Scotland,
Right.
and she didn't really have anyone to look after us when he was away, and I used to go and sit in the corner and just originally just sit and sort of play with my dolls and watch. But as time got on, like, I got my own little leotard and I got myself in there and started taking part as well.
Wow, so it was really something that it got ingrained within you right from an early age, not even a teenager, even before that.
Yeah, and I think that that's why I have the particular outlook on fitness that I have now. For me, fitness isn't always about being, I think the way the industry's gone now, it's very go hard or go home, and all about becoming like this fitness model sort of look, which I think's great, and I applaud anybody who has that commitment and goes and strives and gets that goal. But for me, fitness isn't about that elitist end. It's about more of a holistic approach and all of the other things that it does for you. Like I watched in my mum's classes, people weren't just there because they wanted to lose weight or they wanted to be in great shape. Often people just generally wanted to be fit and look after themselves, or they wanted to go there to meet people, or they had a particularly stressful job and that was their release. And that's always stuck with me, that I think it's important as a trainer to remember there are many different reasons why people want to take part in health and fitness. It's not always about being like at that top end all the time.
I understand that. It seems that you're kind of connecting more with the human side rather than the appearance side. It's kind of interesting because our industry started very much as an offshoot from bodybuilding and then gradually filtered into the group exercise field and into your mainstream gyms. But yeah, you're right. In the last few years, particularly the last 3 or 4 years, we seem to have kind of come round circle again to appearance and physique in a big way in the industry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to completely agree with you.
All right, fantastic. Now, as you look back on your career, I mean, how many years are we talking here that you've officially started in the industry?
Well, I'm 32 now, so 16 years, which feels horrendous to say.
That's very. I wasn't going to ask your age. I thought I'd get in trouble for that. That's why I just was going to ask how many years. So 16 years, yeah, which is by the fitness industry is a long time. A lot of people, within 5 years, nearly half the trainers have usually left. So you are one of those who've succeeded long term. Now, at this point, as you look back, what would you say are your 1 or 2 biggest challenges that you've experienced in that time? And how did you overcome them?
Okay, so I think the first one was when I realised that at one point when I was about 23, I thought I'd nailed everything. Like I was doing PT, I was doing Group X, nice balance of the two. I worked a lot of hours, as a lot of PTs do, but I loved it. It didn't matter. And then I found out I was going to have a baby.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I realised that I couldn't keep on working 50 hours a week and coaching all of these people and doing all these sessions and look after this little baby that I was going to have. So that was my first challenge, working out how I was going to make home life and work together. So the way I overcame that was I started to do more small group training and created a program which I called at the time the Little Black Dress Club, which was aimed at women who were really busy and maybe they had kids and they had minimal time for themselves, so they needed to get maximum results from that small amount of time. and I started coaching 5 people in one session who all had a common goal rather than like doing one-to-one, and that changing the way that I balance my time.
So what year was this when you started doing small group PT?
Small group, the year Heidi was born, so 2010.
Wow, so you were kind of ahead of the curve there, because small group PT's become a very popular trend in the last 2 or 3 years, but you were kind of ahead of the curve there. That's great.
And only out of necessity, really, I had to think of a way that I was going to make that work. So I would say that was one of my biggest challenges. And then the second one is, I think our industry is now more saturated than it's ever been. Like, there are loads more, and certainly notice in my city, in Sunderland, there are more trainers than there've ever been. Like, back in the day, everybody used to know each other. It was quite a small community, but now there are so many people, which is great, because it's going to mean that more people are going to get active in general. But I think my other challenge is being born out of that, which is, how do you make yourself stand out amongst like a growing industry? So for me, that was about like really taking stock of, right, what am I good at? Who do I help? And what do I specialize in? And out of those conversations with myself, with clients, etc., I realized that my niche, as I guess people call it, is working with women who are really busy, who are often pregnant or have had a baby, want to get back in shape. And for me, by having that specialism, that's enabled me to stand out in my local area.
Ah, fantastic. And that leads really nicely into sort of my next thought, which is, you've clearly shown some business acumen there, trying to identify what it is going to make you attractive to other people as their trainer. And that kind of makes me think a little bit more about business branding. And from your current fitness perspective, can you explain what a business brand is?
I suppose the easiest way for me to explain it is that branding is kind of like a dating app.
All right.
Bear with this here.
Okay.
So a lot of people meet online now on stuff like Tinder or whatever it's called, or Plenty of Fish, and everybody judges each other based on how they look and the first impression that they give. And for me, that's what branding is in fitness or any other industry. It's, without knowing anything about that business, what does the branding of the business tell you about them? Just like by looking at somebody's dating profile picture, what assumptions are we making about that person based on the way they look? And like it or not, we do all make our first judgment based on what we see with our eyes. So for me, that's what branding is. It's first impressions, and what will people say about your brand based on what they've seen without hearing anything else.
Well, I think that's a really nice comparison. I like the idea of, if someone was looking at a dating profile, it's more than just the picture, isn't it? You look at the picture and you quickly scan the basic details that is there on that profile, and I kind of think of branding as kind of the same. There is usually an image or an icon that represents the brand, but there's often other elements behind that we also associate with that brand. In your opinion, why do you think, Katie, that branding's so important?
It's getting it right from the beginning is really important, because that's what you do from the start is going to judge and mold how people think of you. So it's everything. It's not just your logo, the colours you've chosen, your image, your strap line. It's also the way you handle yourself, say on social media. It's about the language that you choose, the types of words that you use, how well you articulate yourself. It's all of those things that go together to make up an overall brand.
All right, I really like that you've included so many other elements. Let's get into that just a little bit deeper. If, say, you were mentoring or helping a new personal trainer in the business, let's sort of work with a scenario, and that personal trainer is trying to develop their business brand, what steps would you recommend that individual should do as they start out developing their personal training brand?
Okay, well, the first thing I would do is really think about who your client is, because it's no good creating a brand that's like really hard and fast and beast mode if actually your client base is going to be like older adults and GP referral and that sort of thing. So really think about who your client is, and then go and do some market research. I don't think we do enough of this as like standalone personal trainers. Go out and actually ask those client groups what would appeal to you, what colours like attract you, what sort of words, language, all of those things that we've already mentioned, and ask them. And the most important thing with the market research is go in with an open mind. Like, it's easy to have your own thoughts in your head and want people to sort of fit into that, but really think about what people are saying to you, take it all on board and listen to the bad stuff often more than the good stuff.
So would you suggest if someone does that, that they have some examples of what they've been thinking of to show the market? You know, here, these are the kind of things I'm thinking of. How do you respond to that? Or do you think you should start with a blank slate and let the market tell you before you start predetermining any set branding?
I would go with a total clean slate.
Right.
And ask them about which brands they're already attracted to. So if somebody's attracted, say, to Apple, like, think about what Apple looks like. It's very clean, it's modern, it's minimalistic. So then take those sort of themes and make those work into your brand. The next thing I would do would be look outside the industry for inspiration, because it's so easy. Like, even if you sit down with a designer and say, right, so it's a fitness business, straight away, a lot of designers will automatically come up with some sort of design that incorporates a dumbbell. And before you know it, you look exactly the same as everybody else. So try and look outside the industry for ideas. Look at big brands that are successful in other areas and try and emulate their success by following what they've done. And I would say now, purely because the world of fitness is so competitive, think about creating a brand that looks non-fitness.
Okay, that's interesting. So give me an example.
If we look at, say, One Rebel, which is a really popular boutique gym in London, and you look at their branding, I think it says nightclub. It's very cool. It's not using like all jazzy colours like a lot of fitness brands use. It's minimalistic. It's not fussy. There's no sign of a dumbbell or fitness equipment in any of their logos. It's very standalone. I'm not quite sure what industry that is, but it looks cool. And I think if you can do the same with your own brand, that's going to set you apart from what other people are doing.
And I assume that brand, having not seen that one myself, do they use the text of their words, like it's One Rebel in writing that makes the brand, or do they have an image that sits alongside that?
They use their name, so it's the number one and then the word Rebel.
Right. So it's a word-based brand rather than a visual brand in terms of making a logo like an icon or a picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think they've done a really good job. And then I suppose the last step for me would be consistent across the board. So once you've decided what your brand is, what the guidelines are, what it is that you stand for, and the sort of language you're going to use, make sure that that's consistent across all social media platforms, your website, the clothes that you wear, the way you show up to sessions. If you're doing a presentation, all of the slides, they should fit in with the look of your social media and your website, so it all ties together, which sounds like a big job, but it's so worthwhile putting the extra time and effort into.
Yeah, I would second that. There is a bit of work that goes into that, isn't there? There's work that goes into making sure that each social media platform you choose to use is correctly prepared and branded, that you understand how you use the different platforms slightly differently, but that they still have that same look, feel, language, all of those things. And I would really stress to the listeners, that brand is more than just the image of the logo or the name of the company. It is the feel, the professionalism, the language. It's all of those things, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that one of the first things you said there is your steps to develop your brand was about trying to identify the target market, that the people need to know who it is they're trying to get to. Now, I've worked in fitness for a long time, and I've come across a lot of new trainers who enter the industry, and they're actually not that clear on who they want to train. They know the kind of training they like. Oh, I like to do hypertrophy training, or I like to train for a specific sport. But they don't always know who the target market is. So can you give any thoughts as to how you might help those people identify what their target market actually is?
I think you've got to choose your target market based on one of two things. The first should be maybe it's somebody who is similar to you. So for me, it was other people who'd had a baby, wanted to get back in shape, didn't have a lot of time, because then you can build a really good client rapport because you know exactly what it's like to walk in their shoes. They appreciate that you understand them.
Oh, so
And
high levels of empathy then with those people.
Yeah, that's definitely my number one way of finding the right client group. It also means that I think you'll be extra passionate about it as well as a trainer because it's something that interests you. But then the second way is finding a client group that doesn't have to be like you, but you have strong empathy for, and you feel like there's nothing out there currently that's servicing their needs. Either way, whether it's something you are yourself interested in or not, it has to be something that you feel quite passionately about. That's and you really want to help those people. Yeah,
I totally agree. I think that's a great point, that if there isn't passion behind the target market you're aiming towards, then it's going to be hard to help them feel the energy that you have towards that particular style of training. Yeah, I totally agree. Now, we've talked quite a bit there about helping new people set up, helping them find their feet with regards to branding and things like that. When you've had a career that spanned, 16 years as you have so far, I'd imagine that along that way, things have had to adapt and change rather than you just constantly do the same thing for 16 years. Obviously, having some failures along the way, stepping back up and trying again helps develop you as a fitness professional. But can you share an example perhaps of how you have had to adapt what you do in your fitness business and how that has changed where you're at now?
Okay, well, my first example of changing my business model was when I had Heidi and thinking I need to do less one-to-one and I need to do more small group. And that was really the start of me thinking I need to be able to diversify, because now while I'm younger and fit and I can take on the world, that's great and I'm up for doing that. But in my head I always thought there will come a point where I physically can't do this anymore. All of these hours, all of the physicality of the job. And I think there'll be a time when I don't want to. I haven't reached that point yet, but I think there will be naturally a time when I want things to look slightly different. And I thought that I can't just wait for that to happen and then panic. I need to think, right, I've put these steps in place now so that when I do feel like that, it's not a shock with the system. So things that I've done along the way, added to my, I suppose, a toolbox of things I can do is presenting, running workshops, having online offerings. People call online business like a passive income. I think that certainly isn't the case, because passive implies that you have to do nothing, which would be amazing. So I think it's important for anyone who's thinking about getting into the online space. Yes, it's really good. And yes, it means your body doesn't go through as much physical torment, but it is a lot of work. But it is great. So yeah, doing online stuff, running retreats, seminars, collaborating with other personal trainers and other brands, and doing small group training, doing 2-to-1 training. And all of these things are just different ways of taking the same skill set and adapting them for different scenarios to enable you to have, I think, more variety in your life, which I think keeps you fresh and it keeps you excited about the industry.
You've kind of mentioned there a few things about trying to change who you are and what you're doing. And what I'm interested in is how that potentially affected your branding. Did you stick with the same branding you always had? Or as you diversified, did you feel the need to alter the way your brand appeared to the market?
Yeah, so as my business has become a little bit more diverse, I've had to move away from being Katie Bulmer-Cooke personal trainer and everything being quite like purely fitness and move towards more of just a generic personal brand that can span across everything, because now I do loads of different things. I do TV and radio presenting, professional speaking, consultancy, a huge range of different things. Like my PT business is still in there, but I needed something that spanned across everything, and then everything underneath could have its own offshot of that brand. So it actually took quite a while for that to evolve.
I bet.
But I feel like I've got it to a point where it's more of a personal brand rather than the business being separate, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of using your own charisma, your character, who you are as the business, and then within that you offer a range of services that some are fitness focused, some are media focused, some are business focused.
Yeah.
Would that be right?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, fantastic. And that's a great concept, I guess, for the listeners to think about, that as their business grows and develops, they may consider, having an overarching brand, and within that there's a number of different things that feed into a market that would help their business succeed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially if you are purely in the fitness industry, it's great to have a range of products and services that are varied, not just in what they actually are, but in price point, so that some customers might come along and they might want to download your ebook or something like that for $9.99, right through to your high-end one-to-one training, which is much more expensive. So there's a price point for lots of people that get involved, which means you can help as many people as possible, but also you're not having to turn people away based on a limited offering of a limited number of price points.
Yeah, I really, I'm quite passionate about that point when I work with personal trainers, and I totally agree that, you have to be a shop window still for people. You can't have a 1 hourly price, here my rate is £40 an hour and that's it. Because what if somebody doesn't want that? Immediately they turn away because you have nothing else to offer. Whereas, as you suggest, if there's a range of price points, a range of services, it allows you to engage the customer and work out what would fit them best. And so you can attract lots of customers from all kinds of demographics. So
yeah,
I guess another thought there is that begins to lead us into the concept of needing to market correctly, trying to actually find some way of attracting those people to your business. Now, this obviously is a huge topic. We could probably spend a whole podcast just on the idea of how to market effectively. So I want to kind of dial it in and just get a few thoughts from you. You mentioned earlier about online as a real viable option for personal trainer. So let's fix ourselves within that boundary and say, if you were working with somebody or supporting somebody to create an online marketing campaign, all right, where they wanted to improve the number of clients that they had through online personal training, and there was a fairly tightish budget, what sort of thoughts or advice would you offer?
Well, this is a good question for me, Ben, because my nickname is Budget Bulmer. Because I think everything can be done on a budget. I do. Well, I always sit down when it doesn't matter what project I do now. I always sit down and I say to myself, right, imagine you had no money to make this happen, but it had to be a success. What would you do? And I think that's a good starting point for anybody. It doesn't matter whether you've got 100 grand to spend or 10 quid. You should always ask yourself that question, because often if you have got money to throw at something, you can become blinded in your decision. So starting with that question, some of the usual answers that come up for me, especially if it's in the online space, are video. Video is so powerful, much more powerful than just text or an image. It's engaging. It allows potential customers to see what you're like as a trainer, to be able to build that human relationship without actually meeting you in person. So do as much video content as possible. I know some people are still shy about being on camera and doing all that stuff, but I'd love to say there was a magic formula to make that go away. I think the bottom line is you just have to do it. Don't watch it back too much. Just get that camera out and get yourself out there with some good content. So film some advice, film some workouts, film some interviews with clients or with friends, and get as much good video content out there as possible.
Would you suggest within that, Katie, that they should still have some mindfulness towards their branding?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So again, it comes back to the language that you use, the background, where you want to film it. If you're going for really high-end stuff and you want high-end clients, think about the quality of the video, make sure that you're using a decent camera, the audio is good, all of that stuff.
Great.
Definitely be mindful of that all the time. And that also, those same thoughts should span across into whatever you're doing on social media. Maximise social media as much as possible, but don't get sucked into feeling like you have to be on every platform. So some people think, right, I have to be on Facebook, I have to be on Twitter, I have to be on Instagram and all the rest of it. Pick the social media platforms that are most relevant to your customer demographic. So do some research on what those platforms are, do some market research, look online, look at some stats, and then be really active and really purposeful on like 2 platforms, rather than diluting yourself across a lot of them. To build your following.
I think that's really good advice, by the way. I just think it's so wise, because there's so many social media platforms now. It almost is a challenge to know which ones to use or not to use. And so, I really like that you said get clear on 2 or 3 and then focus on those, and that is it. And perhaps I would even suggest learn to tie those in so that when you post to one, it posts to the others, and you don't get so caught up in having to do 2, 3, 4 platforms. It just gets a bit tiring, I think, when you're doing it all the time.
It can very quickly become a full-time job.
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, be as strict with that as possible. And then to grow your following quickly, look at doing some collaborations, maybe with brands who fit your demographic or with other personal trainers. I think there is a thing in our industry where people are very much like, no, I'm going to keep my stuff over here and I'm going to keep it hidden from everyone else and I'm going to be by myself. I'm not going to share. Well, actually, wouldn't it be a good idea if 2 PTs with a similar customer demographic in a similar area got together, sat down and shared audiences with each other and helped each other to grow? So doing that is really beneficial and actually costs nothing. You're just asking the permission of another trainer to get in front of their audience, and in exchange you do the same for them.
I think that's an interesting thought. And I wonder if the initial reaction, and maybe you've experienced this as you tried to collaborate with other fitness professionals, is well, hang on a minute, we're competitors, and I don't want you stealing my business, or vice versa. I mean, how do you overcome that initial fear when you're trying to collaborate?
So you've just got to be really like a good sound human and say, listen, I'm not here to steal your customer. As I am for me, it's not a one-way street, it's a 2-way street. We'll both benefit from this, and it's about growing our following together rather than against each other.
Katie, would you mind just saying that answer again, because we had a real break in the audio there. So just imagine I've asked the question and just repeat that answer. So my question wasn't it? It was how do you deal with the fear, overcome the fear of collaborating and losing customers? So just go again.
I think you've just really got to explain it in a very basic way that it's not a one-way street. It's for both parties to benefit. You're going to benefit as much from that situation as they are, and it's about working together to achieve a common goal rather than working against each other.
That's great. I wonder whether if you would have an example of such a campaign that you wouldn't mind sharing, potentially, where something did work effectively for you.
A good one that springs to mind off the top of my head is a brand collaboration that I put together. So this wasn't for me personally, it was on behalf of a brand that I work with. They're a supplement company, and they did a brand collaboration with a bag, like a fitness bag company. And both companies had exactly the same customer demographic. In terms of social following, they were pretty level pegging. One wasn't ahead of the other, and they appreciated that if they could both get in front of each other's audience, it would help them grow. And it comes from if you've been following a brand for a long time, you build some trust with that brand, and if that brand now says, oh, and we also like this other brand, it just feels more genuine, it feels more trustworthy. So together they built up a series of good bits of content, video and blogs, and they did a competition together to win a bundle of half of that bundle was made up of the supplements and half was made up of the bag, and did a competition and really saw a massive uplift in their followers, but not just their followers, also their engagement as well. Because this wasn't like a cold introduction. It wasn't like a blind date and meeting for the first time. It was like, he is a brand that we trust, and vice versa.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I also like the fact that you stated there an example where people, they weren't selling exactly the same thing. And I was thinking, how could that work with PTs in a service? And my mind was thinking of something like, you know, collaborate. If you're just a PT and you don't do group exercise, collaborate with somebody who does group exercise. You know, have you ever done that? I know you teach both, but...
Yeah, well, for me, it's slightly different because I do teach both. But I've never had any issue with sharing the content or doing interviews and things with trainers in my local area who I perceive to be of a good standard, very professional, who I think would benefit my followers and my clients. Because that's what it's all about. Like, we're trying to help people, and if you help people, then the pounds will follow. And if I've got somebody who I know who could benefit my followers and customers, why wouldn't I introduce them?
Oh, fantastic. I really appreciate that. I think we've covered some great content I think our listeners are going to really enjoy, and as we got into some of those nuances of branding and things like that. Now, I have one kind of final question to wrap things up, Katie. If you were to, this is a classic question, lots of people ask this question, but I want to ask you, if you were to go back in time to that 16-year-old who was super keen to start in the industry, and you had the knowledge you have now, and you could offer that 16-year-old some advice, what key piece of advice, what one piece of advice would you give her?
I would say that this might sound a little bit fluffy. This is not the sort of thing I would normally say, but I would say believe in yourself more.
Okay. Did you feel you didn't have the confidence then? Or?
I think that I always felt, perhaps because of some of the knockbacks I got in the early days of being too young and inexperienced, I think because of that, I always questioned myself, like, was I good enough? Was I as good as Mrs. Jones teaching down the road and Mr. Smith at the gym, who was a PT? Was that as good as them? And often used to lack confidence because of my age. But actually, when I look back, I should never have felt that way. And I think anyone entering the industry now, whether you lack confidence because of your age or because you haven't been in the industry very long, I think you should always believe in yourself, because that lack of belief, I think, will only slow down like your path of success. Like, you'll get there in the end. I think if you believe in yourself more and put yourself out there a little bit more, you'll get there quicker.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it's easy, isn't it, to spend a lot of time in the early days comparing yourself to everybody else. And you know, there's a great quote which says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And you want to enjoy your job, and if you just compare your imperfections with other trainers and see your weakness, then I totally agree. It's going to slow you down your path. You might still succeed, but you probably would have been a lot quicker if you were just like, I'm going to go for it, regardless of what anybody says.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
And I think the other thing that I would say is, don't always ask for permission. Like, don't wait for somebody to say, yes, it's fine for you to go and do that. If you've got an idea that's different, like when I thought about small group PT before anyone else, certainly around here, was doing it, and if I just sort of waited till somebody else said, yes, it's okay to do small group PT, by then it might have been too late to have ridden that wave of success. So don't wait for somebody else to say it's okay. If you've got good ideas, if you've got good intention, then just go for it.
Oh, that's great advice. I think that's great advice to end the show as well, Katie. It's just go for it, guys. Get out there and make your brand happen, make your business happen. I totally agree. And you know, I express my gratitude to you, Katie, for all your time and your great advice today. I really appreciate it. Any last words before we end?
Only that I still think 16 years on, that the fitness industry is such an exciting place to work. I actually don't think I could think of an industry that moves faster than ours and offers more opportunity. And I think anything that you want from it, you can go out and you can have it.
Oh, thank you.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe and share via social media. You can also rate the show on iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube. If you'd like to know more about us, then check out our range of online courses at www.nordicfitnesseducation.com.